An American man walked into a hospital in Los Angeles for a routine heart surgery and walked out with a bill of $53,000. That same exact surgery, performed by the same type of surgeon, using the same equipment, cost his Canadian neighbor across the border absolutely nothing. Imagine you wake up one morning and your chest feels tight. Not the kind of tight you get after a bad night of sleep. Something deeper. Something wrong. You call your wife into the room, and she takes one look at your face and knows. You are rushed to the nearest hospital. The doctors run their tests, look at their screens, and tell you that you need surgery. Not next month. Not next week. Now. You nod. You sign the papers. They wheel you into the operating room, and the surgery goes perfectly. You survive. You recover. You go home. And then, about 3 weeks later, an envelope arrives in your mailbox. You open it. Your hand starts shaking. The number on that paper is not a mistake. It is not a misprint. It is your bill. $53,000 for surviving, for having the audacity to need medical help in the United States of America. Now, take that exact same story and move it 200 miles north. Same chest pain, same morning, same fear, same surgery, same surgeon training, same operating table, same anesthesia, same recovery room. Same result. The man survives. He goes home. 3 weeks later, he checks his mail. There is no envelope. There is no bill. There is nothing. Because in Canada, that surgery did not cost him a single dollar. Not because Canada is richer than the United States of America. Not because Canadian doctors work for free. Not because the Canadian government is running some kind of charity. But because Canada made a decision decades ago that the United States of America has still not been able to make. And that decision changed everything. To understand why this is happening, you have to go back. Not to last year. Not to the last election cycle. You have to go back to the middle of the 20th century, when two neighboring countries, sharing the longest peaceful border in the world, looked at the same problem and chose two completely different paths. After World War II ended, both countries were rebuilding. Both had soldiers coming home. Both had families that needed stability. Both had politicians trying to figure out what kind of country they wanted to become. Healthcare was a problem everywhere. People were getting sick. Hospitals were expensive. Doctors needed to get paid. And someone had to figure out who was going to cover the cost when ordinary working people could not afford it on their own. In Canada, a man named Tommy Douglas stepped forward. He was the premier of the province of Saskatchewan, and he had a radical idea for the time. He believed that no person should ever have to choose between their health and their financial survival. He believed that a government existed precisely to protect its citizens from that kind of impossible choice. In 1962, despite enormous resistance from doctors, from insurance companies, from powerful business interests, Tommy Douglas pushed through the first universal public health care program in North American history. Saskatchewan became the testing ground. And when it worked, when people stopped going bankrupt over hospital bills, when mortality rates improved, when the system held together financially, the rest of Canada paid attention. By 1984, the Canada Health Act made universal health care the law of the entire country. Every single Canadian citizen, from the richest neighborhoods of Toronto to the most remote villages in the Northern Territories, had the right to walk into a hospital and receive medically necessary care without paying a single dollar out of pocket. The United States of America watched this happen. American politicians debated it. American economists analyzed it. American journalists wrote about it. And ultimately, the United States of America said no. Not once, not twice, but over and over again across decades, across administrations from both political parties, the answer was the same. No. And the reasons given were always the same. It would be too expensive. It would destroy innovation. It would mean the government controlling your health care. It would be socialism. These arguments won every single time, and the American healthcare system continued down its own path, a path built not around the patient, but around the market. Here is what that path looks like in practice today. In the United States of America, healthcare is primarily a private industry. Hospitals are businesses. Insurance companies are businesses. Pharmaceutical companies are businesses. And like every business, their primary obligation is not to the patient in the hospital bed. Their primary obligation is to their shareholders. This means that every decision in the American healthcare system, from how much a hospital charges for a single pill, to how much an insurance company charges for a monthly premium, to how much a pharmaceutical company charges for a medication that costs $2 to manufacture, is driven by the question of how much profit can we extract from this transaction. The results of that system are staggering when you look at them clearly. The United States of America spends more money on healthcare per person than any other country on the entire planet. The average American spends around $13,000 per year on healthcare. That number includes insurance premiums, out-of-pocket costs, deductibles, co-payments, and all the other financial mechanisms that the industry has invented to extract money from sick people. Canada spends around $6,000 per person per year. The United States of America spends more than double what Canada spends, and yet by almost every measurable health outcome, Canadians are doing better. Canadians live longer. Canadian infant mortality rates are lower. Canadians have better access to primary care physicians. And Canadians do not go bankrupt when they get sick. Let that sink in for a moment. The United States of America is spending twice as much money and getting worse results. This is not a matter of opinion. This is not a political talking point. These are the numbers published by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the World Health Organization, and dozens of independent research institutions that have spent years studying this exact question. So where is all that extra American money going if it is not going toward better health outcomes? The answer is complicated, but the core of it is simple. It is going to administrative costs. It is going to insurance company profits. It is going to pharmaceutical company margins. It is going to hospital billing departments that employ more people than some hospitals employ nurses. A single Canadian hospital dealing with a single government payer has a billing operation that is a fraction of the size of an American hospital that has to negotiate with hundreds of different private insurance companies, each with their own rules, their own codes, their own approval processes, and their own ways of denying claims. Studies have shown that administrative costs account for roughly 34% of total healthcare spending in the United States of America. In Canada, that number is around 12%. The United States of America is not paying more because it is getting more care. It is paying more because the system itself is extraordinarily expensive to operate. Now here is the part that most people in the United States of America have never fully confronted. Medical bankruptcy does not exist in Canada. It is not a concept that Canadian families have to think about. In the United States of America, medical debt is the leading cause of personal bankruptcy. Over 500,000 American families file for bankruptcy every single year primarily because of medical bills. These are not people who made bad financial decisions. These are not people who lived beyond their means. These are people who got sick, a cancer diagnosis, a car accident, a premature birth, a heart attack, one medical emergency, and an entire lifetime of savings, of work, of building something can be wiped out completely. This happens in the richest country in the history of human civilization, right next door to a country where it simply does not happen. The argument that defenders of the American system always return to is innovation. The United States of America, they say, is the engine of global medical innovation. The new drugs, the new surgical techniques, the new medical devices, they come from America precisely because the profit motive drives investment in research and development. And there's some truth in this. American pharmaceutical companies and American research institutions do produce an enormous amount of medical innovation. But there are two problems with using this as a justification for the current system. The first problem is that a significant portion of that research is funded by the federal government, meaning by American taxpayers, not by private companies taking financial risks. The National Institutes of Health spends around $45 billion per year funding medical research. That is public money producing discoveries that private companies then patent, manufacture, and sell back to the public at enormous markups. The second problem is that other countries, including Canada, also produce medical innovation. Canada has world-class research universities and teaching hospitals. Canadian scientists have made fundamental contributions to medicine, including the discovery of insulin, one of the most important medical breakthroughs in human history. The idea that without massive private profit margins medicine would stop advancing is not supported by the evidence. What is supported by the evidence is this. In Canada, a child born into a working-class family has the same access to cardiac surgery, to cancer treatment, to emergency care, to mental health services as a child born into a wealthy family. The quality may not be identical in every circumstance, and the Canadian system has its own real problems, including wait times for certain non-emergency procedures. But the fundamental principle holds. Your ability to survive a medical emergency in Canada is not determined by your bank account. In the United States of America, it very often is. Consider the story of insulin, the medication that millions of diabetic Americans need every single day to survive. Insulin was discovered by Canadian scientists at the University of Toronto in 1921. Frederick Banting and Charles Best developed it and sold the patent to the University of Toronto for $1, specifically because they wanted it to be available to everyone who needed it. That was the intention. That was the founding principle. Today in the United States of America, the list price of insulin can reach over $300 per vial. Many diabetic Americans ration their insulin, taking less than their prescribed dose because they cannot afford the full amount. People have died because of this. People have died because they could not afford a medication that was invented 100 years ago and costs less than $10 to manufacture. In Canada, the same insulin costs a fraction of that price because the Canadian government negotiates drug prices on behalf of its citizens. In the United States of America, federal law actually prohibits Medicare, the government health program for Americans over 65, from negotiating drug prices directly with pharmaceutical companies. This law exists because the pharmaceutical industry has spent billions of dollars lobbying Congress to keep it in place. This is the machinery underneath the surface. This is why the numbers are what they are. The American healthcare system is not simply inefficient by accident. It is shaped by decades of deliberate political choices, made under enormous pressure from industries that have a direct financial interest in keeping the system exactly as it is. The health insurance industry alone spends hundreds of millions of dollars every year on lobbying and political donations. The pharmaceutical industry spends even more. These are not companies fighting to protect innovation. They are companies fighting to protect their profit margins. And for decades, they have won. Meanwhile, in Canada, the system is not perfect. Canadians will tell you that themselves. Emergency rooms get crowded. Waiting times for certain elective surgeries can stretch for months. Some rural communities do not have enough doctors. There are real and legitimate criticisms of the Canadian system that Canadians debate actively and openly. But here is the critical difference. Those debates are about how to improve a system that already guarantees every citizen basic medical care. American debates are about whether to guarantee that at all. Canada is arguing about how to make a good thing better. The United States of America is still arguing about whether the good thing should exist in the first place. There is a moment that captures this entire situation with painful clarity. Every year, thousands of Americans drive across the border into Canada to buy prescription medications. They organize bus trips. Senior citizen groups from cities like Detroit and Buffalo load onto coaches and spend a day in Canadian cities, not for tourism, not for sightseeing, but to buy the medications their doctors prescribe them at prices they can actually afford. These are American citizens, living in the most powerful country on earth, crossing an international border to access basic health care that their own system has priced out of their reach. And on the Canadian side of that border, people watch those buses arrive and feel something that is hard to describe. Not superiority, not judgment, something closer to sadness. Because Canada and the United States of America are not enemies. They are friends, allies, partners. They share a border, a language, a history, a culture. And yet on this one question, the question of what a society owes its sick, they're worlds apart. The man who walked out of that Los Angeles hospital with a $53,000 bill did not make a bad decision. He did not choose the wrong insurance plan or go to the wrong hospital or fail to read the fine print. He simply got sick in a country that decided a long time ago that getting sick was a financial transaction. His Canadian counterpart did not get lucky. He did not have a better job or better insurance or more savings. He simply got sick in a country that decided a long time ago that getting sick was a human experience and that no one should have to face it alone. That is the difference. That is the whole difference. And it was not inevitable. It was chosen. The gap between these two systems did not appear overnight, and it will not close overnight either. Canada built its healthcare system brick by brick over decades, through political fights and public pressure and a collective decision that some things matter more than profit. The United States of America is still having that conversation. What is certain is that the conversation cannot be avoided forever. The numbers are too large, the suffering is too visible, and the comparison to the neighbor next door is too clear to ignore. Every year that passes without change is another year of Americans choosing between their health and their financial survival. And that choice in the richest country on earth, right next to a country where that choice does not exist, says everything about what a society truly values when the moment of crisis arrives. If this video opened your eyes to something you had never thought about before, do something simple right now. Share it with one person who needs to hear it. Because the more people understand what is actually happening inside these two systems, the harder it becomes to pretend that things cannot be different. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to know what you think. Do you believe the United States of America will ever build a system like Canada has? And if you're not subscribed yet, now is the time. Every week we go deeper into the stories that the headlines never fully tell. We will see you in the next one.